Great moments are born from great opportunity.
If you want to be loved as real champions, worthy champions, you're going to have to work and improve and change.
The inches we need are everywhere around us.
Hell yeah.
They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second.
Being perfect is about being able to look your friends in the eye and know that you didn't let them down because you told them the truth. And that truth is that you did everything that you could. There wasn't one more thing that you could have done. Can you live in that moment?
If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
This is your time.
The only ones who are going to tell me when I'm through doing my thing is you people here.
Welcome into those people. Hi once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us. Another edition of The Man in the Arena, the Sports Reporters. Before we begin, don't forget, all of our shows are seen live on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Of course, there's all the information here on screen right now. Don't forget, you can download every episode on every major audio podcast platform and on YouTube as well. You catch us live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. But if you go to welcometothearena.com, you can view every episode and download, if you will, of The Man in the Arena, the Sports Reporters. Let's get to it, because it's about time we finally got to the National Football League this season. With so much to do, we've actually had to play catch-up here and finally talk about the NFL with a guy that I have known for a very long time, respected him for a very long time. He is someone who comes from the days of radio, when we used to do a show called The Press Box, the fastest show in sports, which was still the best damn radio sports show of all time. I don't care what anybody says, because we had him on every single week to talk about the National Football League, because frankly, nobody knows the National Football League better than the gentleman who has been at ESPN. He is now on his own website. We'll talk about all that as well, plus on Facebook. It's a pleasure to welcome Russell Baxter into The Man in the Arena and the Sports Reporters. Russell, finally time we get you on the show, my man. Thanks so much.
Well, it's great to be on here. It's fun to do something live with you and so on, which we did years and years and years ago. And it's fun and interesting to see how our business has evolved. And, now we're sitting here, side by side. And the funny thing is, Ed, you and I have never met in person.
Never.
Okay. We've
been to Super Bowls at times and title games. We've been there, but because I was doing television and you were doing something else, we never really got together.
Well, when I was at ESPN, I was behind the scenes person, so on. So I spent a lot of time, doing research. I wasn't an on-air personality whatsoever. I got a little on-air exposure when I did Mike and Mike, when we used to do the 5 things you need to know, and occasional radio spots with guys like Chuck Wilson and John Rourke and Tony Bruno, and again Golick and Greeny in the day and so on. But I was more behind the scenes, working on NFL Primetime with Chris Berman and Tom Jackson. Now I had a blast for more than 2 decades.
Well, but see, that's what makes you so good at what you do, because you didn't spend time having to worry about putting the makeup on.
Well, I don't think there's enough makeup for me anyway, so.
I knew you'd get there. I knew it was just a matter of time before you would actually get to that point, so I figured I'd just go ahead.
Listen, I credit saving the network thousands and thousands of dollars in rouge alone. So,
hey, look, I keep telling people all the time, I got a great face for radio. That's what they've been telling me my whole life, But that's about as far as we're going to go on the business, because if you and I started talking about where our business has gone, this would be a 4-hour show, and the text messages that would come in from across the country, we would have to be pretty much soliciting everything with an 8-second delay. People are talking about
it has changed a lot. When I first started there, and when I first started writing and so on, there was no internet. Okay, I used to do stuff on a word processor in my early magazine jobs. I didn't have a laptop. Finally moved to New York, hired in New York by a guy well, Howie Schwab, who brought me in the late 80s and so on, introduced me to ESPN, and it kind of took over from there.
The Schwab. If there's anybody in our business who doesn't know the
Schwab, many people did not do.
I think in our entire business, male, female, dog, cat, there's maybe 3 people who don't know who the Schwab is, and that would be for their detriment because he's a wonderful guy. Let's get to it. We got so much to do in the National Football League because I really wanted to wait until seeing what this season would become, until I started to talk about it a little bit more, because in the early months when COVID-19 put us all shuttered down in our homes during the summertime, and there was so much waiting about what would happen, I said, let's wait and see what happens with all these different sports. Now, of course, the NFL continues to play. The NFL came out with this marvelous game plan and said, we're going to go ahead, we're going to play the season, we're going to get to the Super Bowl, we're going to have rules, restrictions, our players and our coaches and everybody on the staff is going to pay great attention to what we do, and they're going to do it for the love of the game. Sorry, wait a minute, I'm having a flashback here. I don't know where that script came from, but I've got to stop that. But here we are now with a season that is not, in my mind, a proper season. Because if a guy gets injured, a quarterback gets injured, and he's out for 2 games, with what happens on the field, that's one thing. But when you have an entire quarterback roster being thrown off a team because of a pandemic, and you have guys out there partying around town to make sure that they infect the rest of the team, it doesn't make for a competitive balance in the league. It's really an unfair advantage given to teams. So can we say that the National Football League has failed in many ways when it comes to this, and it has become a season that in many ways is going to have an asterisk next to it or some kind of a notation that it wasn't really a proper competitive season?
Well, I think COVID-19 is going to have to be taken into consideration given all the circumstances and so on. But, I'm looking at the situation that goes on with Denver, and even the Broncos themselves, Vic Fangio and Jeff Driscoll came out and basically admitted they broke the rules. Let's go back to earlier in the season when Tennessee was the first team that really kind of screwed up in terms of, COVID violations and so on. And it caused the postponement of the Pittsburgh-Tennessee game and the shuffling of the schedule and so on. And we're having 2 Monday night games other than week 1, and we had a Tuesday night game. And then, of course, Cam Newton was diagnosed with COVID. Kind of a different situation. What happened with the Broncos this past week was they kind of broke the rules. What's happened with the Ravens this week is I believe it's their strength and conditioning coach broke the rules. And I'll go back to after the Tennessee game. You will remember, Ed, that the league really clamped down and really made it clear that we are going to be a lot even more stricter than we were earlier in the season. Ed, you will remember, you all had to buy masks, obviously, dealing with COVID-19. I don't know about you, but my mask did not cost $250,000. Okay? There were some NFL head coaches' masks who cost $250,000, and their teams were fined even more for not having their mask on the sideline. So I think the league took this very, very seriously. But I understand where you're coming from in the sense of the asterisk, because we're seeing something. It's not like 20 guys had high ankle sprains in the same week. And, all 4 quarterbacks blew out their knees, God forbid, in the same drill. Okay? So I understand that all aspect of it well. And I think the NFL, they have done, I think, their best to shuffle and postpone. We haven't had a game canceled yet. That's one thing to keep in mind, even though I'll be interested.
They continue to postpone the games, hoping beyond hope that they can get past a quarantine date or an infection date, and they keep postponing. And you and I both know that the way NFL teams are structured in their practice sessions and the way it is every week, and then with a couple of bye weeks here and there, that to interrupt that is makes a huge difference in team preparation, because you only play once a week. So just for the fact that you have to wait another day and another day and another day, that affects the level of play on the field without question.
Well, listen, we didn't really have training camps this year. We had no preseason this year. It's a very disjointed season, and all that's going to be taken into consideration, I'm sure, down the road. And yet, it's amazing the amount of offensive football we've seen this year. So I don't know if it's an offensive explosion or defensive inefficiency, but the numbers being put up by the quarterbacks are unbelievable. And, scoring 30 points in the game used to be a gimme in terms of a win. It hasn't been like that this year. We've seen a lot of 35-31s and 39-38s and, 45 this and 45 that. Team scores, what did Atlanta score this year? Over 38 and lost at Dallas. And so we've seen some really, really unusual circumstances. When I was thinking about this as I was getting ready to do the show with you, I love movie analogies. And this is what I thought of about what the league has done so far in doing their best. Again, they haven't canceled anything. We haven't had a forfeit. Okay, from I understand the rule, but team forfeits, teams don't get paid. Players don't get paid. So I think that's something the league certainly wants to avoid. But, Ed, you will remember the movie Ghostbusters, of course, and the scene where the ghost, the mystic thing, is roaming through the hotel, and the Ghostbusters use their
proton packs.
Gun. Proton, thank you. You very good. And they almost wipe out this poor cleaning lady. Okay.
Yep.
And remember, she's laying on the floor and she's got a spray bottle and she's trying to put out the toilet paper that has caught fire all over. You remember that scene?
Yes, I do.
That's what the NFL has been doing so far, trying to put out
same thing.
Trying to put out these little fires here and there, and I think they're trying desperately to avoid a Week 18, and they're trying to avoid putting actually 16 teams in the playoffs, which, by the way, I don't want to have to remind you, is not unprecedented.
No.
Back in 1982, when we had a 9-game season because of the strike, there were 28 teams in the league. 16 of them went to the playoffs, and 12 of them stayed home. So this would be 16 and 16. Again, I don't think they really want to do that. But as we go through this second or third wave in the world and in the nation of COVID, I think it's becoming more and more difficult, and something to really keep in mind. Week 13, Carolina and Tampa Bay are off. That's the end of the bye weeks. That's the end of the off weeks. Everybody's done their thing. So if there is another outbreak or two, it might be inevitable that they have to push the season back to a Week 18.
Here's where I think they made the mistake, and perhaps this was they simply couldn't avoid it. If you look at the NBA and the NHL, and of course very different sports with smaller rosters, smaller coaching staffs, but they're playing a lot more games. They were able to control their teams by putting them under a lockdown, basically, putting them in quarantine. And the seasons were very successful. Look, as much of a hockey guy as I am, I missed having my Bruins in the Stanley Cup playoffs and missed having fans in the stands, but it worked. But here's the National Football League saying, we are going to put this in the hands of the players and the coaches and the staffs. You guys have got to be aware of what's going on, and we're going to trust you. Russell, that was the single worst thing they possibly could have done. You can't trust, especially players, to give a damn about anything outside what's off the field. So to put that power in the hands of the players, to me, that was dynamite. And even now we're finding out that a lot of the coaches couldn't do it either.
Well, as we saw, a strength and conditioning coach in Baltimore and so on. But just do the math, Ed. What are there, 25 guys on a baseball team? And there's, 12 NBA players on a roster, active roster? There are 53 players on an active NFL roster, okay? Times that by 30. We're talking 1,800 individuals. And we're not even counting the assistant coaches and coaching staff. So you're asking to police well over 2,000 people. And there's always going to be someone in the group that says, quote, it's not going to happen to me. Okay. And they're going to go do this and they're going to go do that. And as we're finding out, this thing can strike at any time. And, again, I applaud Vic Fangio and Jeff Driscoll for taking responsibility for what happened with the team and the quarterbacks and so on. And I don't know what's going to happen in terms of punishment and so on. I don't know what's going to happen with the Brian. It was reported that both Denver and Baltimore are being investigated. You saw this week the Saints got hit with a fine and lost a draft choice.
And now the Patriots are getting hit with a fine too. The Patriots they're coming after too.
Right. So I mean, they really laid down the law after the Tennessee, which is funny. Tennessee got fined.
Yep.
Okay, but they didn't lose a draft choice. And now, since that happened, and remember, Tennessee, they were having practices when they weren't supposed to having practices and so on. So it's, again, maybe it's that mentality. If it can't happen to me, maybe it's that, listen, we're talking about football players who are used to playing hurt.
They're indestructible, Russell. That's how they feel at all times.
Yes. I mean, that's certainly got to be part of it. Okay. And yet you have other teams that have been pretty well skated COVID for the most part. You'll have an outbreak of one person or an outbreak of one person, and that person has to sit and so on. It hasn't affected the team. So I'm actually in some ways surprised we haven't had more happen.
Indeed.
But I'm kind of waiting ahead. I kind of got my fingers crossed down the stretch here for the last 5 weeks of the season, because again, if there is a major outbreak, it's inevitable. They have no more wiggle room. There's no other room to play with. I mean, this Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, if it is played Tuesday night, already affects Thursday night football, because Dallas is supposed to be at Baltimore on Thursday night. They're certainly not going to play a game on 2 days rest.
Right.
If Baltimore and Pittsburgh play, that game's already scheduled to be moved to Monday, and a doubleheader with the Bills-San Francisco game. Speaking of the 49ers, they're now going to play the next 2 weeks in Arizona because of what's going on in the state of California.
See, and here's the question then that this comes down to, because we've hit all the salient points here. It's impossible to keep that number of people locked up. You could do it with the NBA, the NHL, even Major League Baseball. So let's say it's a given that the NFL can't do it. But when you have full quarterback rosters out, when you have key defensive players out, when you have key offensive players that are missing, you are changing the game. You're changing what the game is played for and planned for at that moment by the players that the team puts on the field, specifically the starters. You brought it up and I talked about it. If they're injured, fine, we get it. But this is something that could and should have been stopped had people paid attention and paid closer attention to what they were doing with quarantines and watching where they were going in social distancing, masks, everything else. Is this season then the one that no matter what happens, you have got to place a notice at the end of it? It has got to be in the history books, the season that where every player didn't play, where every team wasn't at its 100% peak of players, and where they had to play under different circumstances. To me, you must do that. I know people hate asterisks. I hate them too. But to me, this season is made for it.
Well, I don't know if it'd be technically an asterisk. I only can remember one asterisk in the NFL. Okay?
Yeah.
And for people, there was a game in 1989 between the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers in which Mike Ditka and the Bears lost. Don McCown, who's the quarterback there, the Magic, was over the line of scrimmage. And depending on the angle and so on, it was a bad call. And I believe the Bears lost the game 15-13. And Coach Ditka, who I had an opportunity to work with at ESPN, made the Bears PR department put an asterisk in the Bears media guide under that law. And it stayed there for a long time, even after Coach Ditka left. It's not there anymore, I understand, and so on. But in all seriousness, when the Pro Football Hall of Fame writes about the 2020 season, and writers write about and document it, and even to a point, the NFL Record and Fact Book, which always does a recap of the season and so on, I'd be very surprised if that was not mentioned, and the circumstances of this entire season. Again, we've seen wild offensive football. We're seeing amazing performances from Patrick Mahomes and Derrick Henry and, the undefeated Steelers as of right now. Unfortunately, the winless Jets, on the opposite end of the spectrum and so on. So all that, well and good and so on. But I don't think you can write about this season, Ed. I know I haven't. I mean, when I do my power rankings and I do my weekly trends and so on, I mean, the words COVID-19 are in there 3 or 4 times a week. So
every conversation.
It's inevitable. It's inevitable. We're doing, we've already talked about 20 minutes about it and so on. And
But it is the overriding factor in the 2020 season. You can't escape it, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
When there were momentary issues you couldn't escape, controversy such as with the New England Patriots, with Deflategate and all this, the nonsense that goes on here, drug issues that go on in football from time to time that take key players out. But there's never been anything that affects every single team every single week. So it has to be in the COVID-19 season of 2020, I think is what things have to begin with from here on out.
Well, unprecedented. It's an unprecedented world event. So of course it's an unprecedented. Listen, we saw an NBA championship all decided in one building, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So anything that's gone on here, sports wise or entertainment wise, and so on, is all going to have that. I mean, it's that year. It's an unprecedented football season, unprecedented history throughout the world.
Do we then take, and again, just pointing out what we've said, everything is prefaced by COVID-19 in the 2020 season and every single game. I don't know about you, but I'm with the Broncos whining about the fact that the NFL is out to get us, and the Saints fans and Saints teams still even saying you're out to get us because you've always been out to get us, and now the Patriots are going to start whining about it. Look, I'm sick and tired. Enough of the whining. You guys had the opportunity to take control of your team and your players, and your players didn't do what it take. They didn't shut their mouth, do what they had to do, wear the mask, stay away from the parties. So there's no one to blame. Look, the NFL is doing exactly as they said they would. Or am I missing something?
Right.
I don't think so.
No, that's exactly. And that was my point from the get-go. These teams that have broken the rules that were re-emphasized and accelerated. It was almost like after Tennessee happened, the league was saying, listen, we're not kidding around here. This is serious business, okay? And if we had, because you remember people threw out the F word, the forfeit word, early on. And the league doesn't really want to do that. But with what was going on there for a spell, I think in October and so on, there's like, hey, wait a minute. If you're not going to follow the rules, maybe we will get really, really down and dirty when it comes to discipline and so on. And I think, I'm not sure what we're going to see in terms of Denver and Baltimore, but there's going to be ramifications for what happened. There's no question about it. I don't think the league's going to the trouble of looking into what has happened with them without levying some kind of punishment and so on. So,
and I think they deserve it. Look, I think the teams deserve it. They really do, because the teams will come back and say, look, they're grown men and we can't control them. Wrong. They're paid employees of your organization, and they're the men who have to abide by the rules of the league. These are the rules. Here it is, straight out here. And if your players can't abide by the rules, and it's going to hurt the entire team. There used to be this idea that from a football player standpoint or any athlete standpoint, you don't hurt the team. Mm-hmm. But in essence, guys like Cam Newton and whomever else is out there basically flaunting the rules, they're hurting the team. You'd like to be able to say you get rid of them. Of course, you can't do that. It's not that easy in the NFL. But it's your own people that are breaking the rules. So your whining reaches a deaf ear as far as I'm concerned.
Well, listen, the league tests continuously. I'm just off the top of my head, and I'm not going to sit here and do numbers because I'm sure I'm going to miss something. But, there are certain teams in the league. We haven't heard anything about COVID. Nothing at all whatsoever about anybody with a positive test and so on. And in a twist of words and a little irony, you would think that a football player would know something about wearing a mask.
Yes. Come on. Well, but again, if we're going to, there's a part of me that says, no. Having been around football players my entire life and professional athletes. But it also is what happens here, because you're saying, well, wear a mask on the sideline. And I swear, I've talked to medical professionals, and this gets the greatest laugh every time this is brought up.
Right.
Look, they're wearing masks on the sideline. Then they go right out onto the field, and they're exchanging sweat, bodily fluids, everything else, as much air as possible. So the masks on the sideline do absolutely nothing to stop any transfer between the players. It's a show game more than anything else. I mean, at least the coaches have a mask on at all times.
Well, masks, visors. I mean,
I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for NASA to, and I'm shocked that NASA didn't come out with some kind of a bodysuit here to basically put all the coaches in. I don't expect.
Andy Reid has looked like a welder at times.
Andy Reid was a welder at one time.
I mean, but it's like I said, you're spot on. It's going to be something that down the road we're going to talk about historically. It's a different kind of a year. I applaud the NFL for getting as far as they have so far without having to shut the whole thing down. And
they
like
were
I said,
in a no-win situation. They really were.
Well, but listen, people are starved for football. There's no question about it. And here's the thing. I'll also throw this out. They were able to pull off the draft without a hitch. They were able to pull off free agency without a hitch. And it was business as usual. And inevitably something was going. Remember, we had some positive testing during the preseason.
Yes.
That's why there was no Hall of Fame game and eventually no preseason. That's the first time I really kind of got nervous about football season, Ed, is when they shut down the Pro Football Hall of Fame game. They were actually a product on the field was not going to be played. And then they made the call to shut down the entire preseason. And, the first couple of weeks, no real glitches and so on. Then, of course, it started with the Tennessee Titans situation and so on. And now this has been obviously the most troubling week so far. What happened in Denver, what's happened with Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera. There's a couple Pittsburgh Steelers waiting for second tests and so on. So I kind of got my fingers crossed that this game is actually going to be played on Tuesday. As of right now, as we are talking, the game is scheduled for Tuesday.
Your lips to God's ears and everything else that's in here with luck for these teams. All right, we can now maybe get off COVID. Well, we can never really get off what's happening in COVID. I mean, everything is involved in it here. But let's talk about a few things on the field and some players as well. Tom Brady has been an interesting character and an interesting story no matter how you look at this year, simply because of what he did, Tampa Bay, and now the arguments that he's arguing with Bruce Arians and that there's some friction going on in Tampa. To which I basically said, hey, Tom, you don't have the same players, you don't have the same coaches, you don't have the same schemes, and you're a year older. It all kind of fits in there when you think about it. So when you look at the whole argument about Brady, in your opinion, is it the fact that has he just lost a step? Yeah. Is the coaching bad? Don't know. The fact that he has no players, maybe that's part of it. Because I'll tell you what, Patrick Mahomes sure showed him up again and showed that he is the better quarterback in the league right now. But from Brady's standpoint, what's your take?
Well, listen, it's very ironic because remember, New England was 8-0 last year, and then split their last 8 games and then were 1-out in the playoffs. And Tom Brady didn't play particularly well, but a lot of that also had to do with New England's defense, which got exposed in that loss to Baltimore on Sunday night. It turned out the New England defense was great when you threw the ball against them. It wasn't so great when you ran the ball against them. They were more built from the back end. Here's the ironic part, Ed. For the most part, New England last year, what did you hear about Tom Brady and his chances of success? Well, they don't have enough weapons. Tell me you heard that. I'm sure everybody did, okay? Now,
well, that's always, you and I both know that has been Tom's, no matter what, even in the Super Bowl years, he would always say, I need more weapons.
Right. I'm not necessarily saying that comes from Brady. I'm talking about people who viewed New England last year and said, Rob Gronkowski is gone and, they just don't have the playmakers they have and so on. And the ironic part is now he's in Tampa where they have a plethora of weapons and things aren't going as smoothly as I think some people would think, especially as of late. Now, I will also point out, because I wrote a piece about this, is Tampa's defense last year was horrendous and got hot late in the season. This year was pretty good early in the season and has been pretty horrendous the last 4 or 5 games. I mean, the Saints took them apart. Okay, that was, I know that was Brady, a lot of 3-and-outs and so on, but the Saints moved it. Did anybody watch Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill yesterday do that to Tampa? Tampa gave up well over 500 yards of total offense for a team that was 5th in the league in total defense. Okay, so Todd Bowles' unit has to take, and I think to a degree, Bruce Arians is trying to push a little because right now his defense isn't necessarily holding up its end of the bargain. He's looking for more quick strike, whereas Tom is a little more meticulous, the underneath stuff, not to saying he can't throw long and so on, but I'm watching, I think what's the second game in a row? 3 times in the last 4 games, I think it is, he's thrown at least 2 picks.
At least 2 picks.
And there's an element of forcing the ball down the field and so on. And I'm not going to blame Bruce Arians. I'm not going to blame Tom Brady. I'm going to blame everyone because I think in some ways the Tampa offense is pressing right now because in some ways I don't think Tampa's defense is living it up to its early season success.
Do you sense, though, from afar that there is some friction going on here between Brady and Arians?
Well, I think there could be. It was interesting to watch Tom Brady's press conference today, which he kind of cut off a little short, and he didn't want to really get into, almost a discussion about what's going on. And he took obviously the high road, and you could sense it was we win as a team, you lose as a team, and that's really what you should say and so on. But there's got to be some elements of frustration as to what's going on. I mean, you just don't see someone as accomplished as him make mistakes in bunches like he has the last 4 games. I mean, I think they got intimidated in some ways in that loss to the Saints. Okay, it was a chance for revenge. Remember, earlier in the season, they pushed the Green Bay Packers around. That was really like their coming out game. And, a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden they're swept by the Saints, and they're never in the game. They lose by 35 at home. And, pardon me, this is, I want to say off the top of my head, I think they've lost 3 straight at home now, to the Saints, to the Rams. This is not only the Kansas City game yesterday, but 6 days earlier, they lost at home to Monday night.
Right.
And again, the defense, what happened with Jared Goff? I believe the Rams had 200-yard receivers. So where's the back end of the Tampa defense being able to cover guys?
I'm not sure. That's a good point from the defensive side, but I'm not sure. And Arians, look, he's a veteran coach. Let's not take anything away from the fact he's a veteran.
Head coach of the year.
Yeah, but it still seems as if he's struggling, and so is that staff a little bit to sort of put the offense together, make it work for Tom, and we still have a damn good defense here, and we've got to keep that good. It almost seems as if there's some kind of push-pull going on there that nobody quite can figure out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you whatsoever. I think there's a little bit of an identity crisis, and maybe it's because they have so many toys to play with, okay? And O.J. Howard's not there right now, the former first-round tight end and so on, but they got Mike Evans, and they have Antonio Brown, and they have Chris Godwin. They have Ronald Jones, who I think came into the game the 3rd leading rusher in the league. He actually caught a touchdown pass yesterday. There seems to be think about it this way. Tom Brady's been an NFL quarterback longer than Bruce Arians has been an NFL head coach, and much longer than Byron Leftwich has been an NFL offensive coordinator. Okay, and listen, Bruce Arians' coaching legacy, going back to college and all that stuff, he's been involved in football for years and years and years. But it took him a long time to get an NFL head coaching gig. Okay, he filled in for Chuck Pagano. When he was ill and so on, he went on to Arizona. He took them to the playoffs a couple of times, retired for a year, and then comes back with Tampa. And the Bucs are trying to, it's funny. The Cleveland Browns and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both having very successful seasons, the top 2 teams in the league in terms of playoff droughts. Cleveland hasn't been there since 2002. The last time the Bucs were in the playoffs, Gruden head coach in 2007.
Long time between having a good team, and they've got one now.
The last time, let's put it this way, the last time the Bucs were in the playoffs, Tom Brady was going 16-0.
See, that's astounding when you think about that, how long it's been, and you don't realize 13 years have gone by, because Brady's always been there, no matter how you put it. So now let's push past Tampa for a minute, and let's get to something else that kind of is a side issue here, because Tom Brady leaves New England. They struggle. They got to bring in Cam Newton. He has, at moments, shown brilliance, at moments, shown little brilliance, if you will.
Right.
There are, boy, I love trying to just dance around this. It's funny. I got my Fred Astaire shoes on this one, and I'm being careful, but maybe I just should stop being careful. But New England is a changed team. Belichick, to me, and I covered Belichick for several years when I worked in Boston, has always worked miracles with that team. He's been able to find the right player and mix him in. Well, things change a little bit, and everybody gets a little bit older, and the league moves on a little bit, and everything evolves. So the simple question is, has Bill Belichick reached a time when it's the end of the road? The other teams have caught up. He's older. It's going to take longer to build that franchise back up again, and maybe he took way too many chances in the last few years.
Well, the last few years, when they were able to win Super Bowls, when they won in 14 and 16 and 18, they won in a different way than they won early in the dynasty. Okay, those dynasty days were defensive driven and special teams driven. And Tom Brady never threw more than 28 touchdown passes in any of those first three seasons. Right. They won the Super Bowl. One of my favorite historic stats of all time when the Patriots won the Super Bowl in 2001, their offense in 3 playoff games scored 3 touchdowns. Their defense, 3 touchdowns. And Tom Brady was going around for 2 of those offensive touchdowns. Remember, he got hurt in the AFC title game at Pittsburgh, and Drew Bledsoe came in and threw a touchdown pass. Now fast forward to 2014, okay, when they have to rally from 10 down and give up 24 points to the Seahawks. 2016, they're down, obviously, 28-3 in the big comeback and so on. They won a different way on the back end of the dynasty, and of course, the ugly 13-3 game in which they beat the Rams and so on. The problem with the Patriots right now is when he did not have a dynamic offense in the early days in New England, Ed, he could rely on the defense and special teams to bail him out. He doesn't have that kind of defense or special teams right now. Now, Nick Folk hit the game winner yesterday. I understand that, okay? But he got playmaking we had Willie McGinnis and Teddy Bruschi and Ty Law and those type of guys who rose to the occasion. I mean, Ty Law had pick 6, you'll remember, in Super Bowl against Kurt Warner and so on. So they were able to make big plays. I always make the case that Mike Rabel in Super Bowl 38. Now, Brady was the MVP and Vinatieri hit the field goal.
No, I was at that game, and I got news for you. Mike Vrabel was the MVP of that game.
Everywhere. Mike Vrabel caught touchdown passes. He had tackles. He had sacks. He had forced fumbles. He did you couldn't have he was almost like a two-way player in that game. He doesn't have those type of players right now. Stephon Gilmore has been up and down this year after winning Defensive Player of the Year. He doesn't have the front-end guys to stop the run. They're a substandard run defense. So the old school football that he relied on to win those 3 Super Bowls in 4 years in the early days, he doesn't even have that kind of personnel to pull that off. And yet they beat the Dolphins, they beat the Raiders, they beat the Cardinals. They're sitting at 5-6. And the team I'm watching for in the AFC right now is actually Las Vegas. Because if they play the way they played yesterday for the next couple of weeks, and the Patriots can scratch some wins out, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's always an if for the Raiders. You and I both know that.
There's 7 teams in each conference this year instead of 6.
But here's the thing, and you bring up the great point. We're talking about the demise of the Patriots here with one season. And you brought up the fact that, look, it's not like they've been 20 years without winning Super Bowls. This has been an honest-to-God, truthful dynasty in the NFL. But let's then look at it. Would seem as if Belichick always goes, he's got great talent, and then it dips, and he manages to fill in some spaces. And then he comes back up again, and he manages, when it dips, to come back up again and build it again.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, that's got to end. You can't do that all the time. And other teams certainly get better in the same breath, and organizations certainly get better, as long as you're not Detroit or the New York Jets. But you have that possibility. So does he have any more in the tank? Can he go out and patch? It doesn't seem as if he can patch this season, but can he continue this Band-Aid approach and win another title?
I don't think, and I think here's the biggest problem right now for him, Ed, is he's not chasing one team in the AFC East. He's chasing 2. Okay, and he's used to being being chased. Okay, the former record for consecutive division titles was 7 by the Rams from 73 to 79. They've won 11. They blew that away. The previous record for consecutive playoff appearances was 9. They have 11. Okay? So what he's done, in fact, if they somehow get to 9-7 this year, they will tie the all-time record of consecutive winning seasons of 20 by the 1966 to 85 Dallas Cowboys. You are spot on. This is the word, a dynasty in the truest sense of, even though you didn't win Super Bowls, you're continuously a contender. And even the year they missed the playoffs in 2008, they were 11-5. It wasn't like they missed the playoffs at 5-11. Okay, so what they've done is unprecedented. But right now, they've got a young, exciting team in the Buffalo Bills, who they lost to earlier this year. I know they beat Miami, but I think people would argue that the Dolphins are headed in the right direction, and the Patriots.
Shocking season for the Dolphins. Let's be honest.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But picked up from where they left off last year when they were 5-4, and remember, beat New England in New England and spoiled the Patriots' opportunity to get a first-round bye by driving the length of the field with Ryan Fitzpatrick and doing it in Fox. So I think it's one thing if you're like in the AFC North, it's kind of Baltimore, Pittsburgh with Cleveland lurking. Right now, the Patriots are chasing two teams in the AFC East, and it's probably a situation that might be a little uncomfortable for them.
I'm going to get to those in just a couple of minutes because I want to bring those teams into it here. But I want one more thing before we get to that. The NFC East, which
yeah,
as I was growing up, when I was young back in those heady days of football, it was always watching the Giants and the Cowboys and the Redskins and the Cardinals even at that point when they were there. It was the division to watch. Russell, this is a full-out dumpster fire. You've got fire trucks arriving from every point around every city area in every single one of these franchises here. This is a terrible division to watch. I mean, why? When you think about it, why is it that the NFC East is really so bad at the same time?
It's almost mystifying. I think in some ways,
completely.
Yeah, in some ways, I'll say one thing that's an issue. And you have to look at it, Dallas made a coaching change this year. Washington made a coaching. Everybody made a coaching change except Philadelphia, okay? It's a division where we've seen, how many head coaches have the Giants gone through since Tom Coughlin, okay? We had Ben McAdoo, and then I think Steve Spagnuolo was the interim coach when they let him go, and then they had Pat Shurmur. Now they're on Joe Judge, although you have to like what Joe Judge is doing. Ron Rivera's there. Jay Gruden got fired, 5 games into last year, and then Bill Callahan. So the lack of continuity in terms of head coaches hasn't helped. You bring up a good point. Go back to the early 90s when this division won 5 Super Bowls in 6 years, okay? The Giants in 90, the Redskins in 91, and then the Cowboys 3 times in 4 years, okay? For the longest time, this was the only division in the league that had no team win less than 10 games, if I'm explaining that right. And this will now be the second consecutive year that the NFC East champion will have less than 10 wins. Even if any of these teams are on the table, everybody can't get the 10 wins. Okay? I mean, that's pretty bad. Okay?
But are we looking at front offices here? Is it just that's because when you look at these teams, the Cowboys still have Jerry Jones, who every single day can't keep his mouth shut and let somebody actually run the franchise. The Giants have been an absolute hot mess for the last few years. The Philadelphia Eagles, you mentioned, they've had some good things go on in the front office, but they can't seem to pull it together from the quarterback standpoint of things.
Right.
And if you put all these things in here, it just seems if that we are looking at the one division where we have a collection of the worst front offices. And look, I'm not even going to go to Washington. I'm leaving them out of the mix here, because that's a disaster and has been for a long time. But it looks like we have a coalescence of the single worst group of professional sports front offices in any division anywhere in American sports.
Yeah, you bring up Jerry Jones, and listen, they haven't won a Super Bowl in 25 plus years now. I will never get over the fact that you hear more from the owner than you do the head coach when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, okay? Like we said, Washington and the Giants going through their share of head coach and going through their share of quarterbacks as well. Alex Smith is a great comeback story, but they did invest a first-round pick in Dwayne Haskins last year. The Giants invested a first-round pick. Philadelphia is interesting. They finished 9-7 2 years in a row, but they've actually been to the playoffs 3 years in a row,
yes,
which is only 3 other teams in the league can say that. New England, Kansas City, and New Orleans. And, of course, they won that Super Bowl in 2017. And, of course, the quarterback to help get them there was just benched in Chicago.
And it seems so long ago. That's 3 seasons if you think about it. I mean, it's just yesterday.
They've had injury problems. Their defense is now deteriorating in Philadelphia. It just shows you that window. But you're right. I can't think of we've had other divisions won by losing. Seattle did it 10 years ago. We had the Cam Newton Panthers go 7-8-1 in 2014. By the way, Seattle and Carolina actually won playoff games that year. with sub 500 records. But I'm trying to remember a stretch where just bad football. I mean, a lot of these games involving the NFC East teams are not exactly nail biters. I mean, the Giants I will say this, the Giants have had a nice stretch. Okay, the Giants had a 5-game stretch where I think it was 5 games decided by a total of like 10 points, something in that realm. Then they beat Phil. They've actually won 3 in a row. They've done a better job of not turning over the football. That's the other thing. Go back and look at the NFL leaders in terms of team turnovers and so on. Okay, there are bakeries in this country that don't produce the kind of turnovers that the NFC East does this year. So
it's just for people who don't like New York, Philadelphia, or Washington, it's a revelatory time for them to be able to root against the NFC East. And Dallas, too, which still brings up most of America. I remember when it was America's team. Now, in many ways, it's America's most hated team. But then that's difficult to take from Washington and New England and others along the line.
Right. So success breeds, as you know, success breeds contempt.
Success breeds contempt, and that's why the Dallas Cowboys have always been the most contemptuous, but they haven't won in a long time, so that's still kind of strange. But that's, of course, New England. All right, a couple of things. Let's go ahead and get to this because this is a good idea to start on here and kind of, you and I have not spent time doing this for a long time, but let's put all these teams together here because now that we have this different season that has come by the board, this COVID-19 season, let's look ahead. No, wait a minute.
Okay.
Let's look back. Let's look at the negatives, first of all. I'm going to go to the negatives first. Because in your opinion, which are the franchises that are now, when you look at them, there's no doubt, these teams and franchises are just built for the long haul, depression, desperate, losing. I mean, these are franchises that if you and I get together and play this back in 5 years, we will be prescient because we will know damn well that these franchises aren't going anywhere.
Well, I look at what's going on, and it's funny how things can become unhinged very, very, very quickly. The Jets have a general manager now in Joe Douglas, okay? But it's going to be – I can't see Adam Gase being back. As it's funny, as we have seen 3 head coaches get fired during the season. One of the things I read on Twitter is, how did Adam Gase last this long?
Come on, that's a fair question. Let's be honest. This guy does not deserve to be a head coach in the National Football League. He never stole a freight train, but this is a guy who shouldn't be coaching in the NFL, at least in a head coaching role. No way.
It's interesting because Houston and Atlanta and Detroit decided to, cut bait even during all the stuff that's going on with COVID and so on. Early in the season, they're winless. Houston has played better. Atlanta has certainly played better since Dan Quinn. They won 4 of their last 6 games, as a matter of fact. And you saw what they did with the Raiders. The Jets, it's hard to imagine. Here's the other thing. The Jets have not been to the playoffs since 2010. They actually have the 3rd longest drought in the league. They got to the AFC title game back-to-back years with Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan and so on, and they haven't been able to recapture that. The other team that's kind of a head-scratcher right now for me, Ed, are the Chargers, who had a big window 2 years ago. They're 12-4. They were tied for the best record in the AFC. Lost out on the tiebreakers to Kansas City. Actually went to Baltimore and knocked off the Ravens in the playoffs, and then they got smoked in New England, and they haven't recovered since then. 5-11 last year, 3-8. I mean, all the 17-point leads they've blown this year and so on. Very unsettling. I'm watching them trying to handle the clock at the end of the game in Buffalo yesterday, and that was a mess. They let the Bills let them crawl back into the game down 24-6, and it was theirs for the taking, and it was like they almost refused to take it. And that's a bad sign for Anthony Lynn. They have a young, impressive quarterback in Justin Herbert, but they just didn't manage the football game very, very well and haven't done that all year. And I'll be curious to see where that organization is headed. And
okay, so you've got San Diego and you've got the New York Jets. Pick one more.
I'm curious to see where the Bears are headed. Okay, I think Ryan Pace has taken an awful lot of heat for the Mitch Trubisky move, for what he gave up to get him, moving up in the draft to the 2nd spot. He flip-flopped 1 spot, and that's all there was, to get Mitch Trubisky, but he certainly hasn't panned out. They brought in Nick Foles. Nick Foles has been the disappointment. And now their defense, there's now only one, after what happened in Green Bay last night, there's only one team in the entire league that has not given up at least 30 points in one game this year. And you won't be surprised, it's the Steelers. Okay? The Bears and the Steelers are the last two teams. The Bears gave up 41 last night. I know one of those was a defensive touchdown, but 41 is 41, and Aaron Rodgers made it look easy against them. I'll be curious to see where Ryan Pace is headed. I'm not trying to forecast doom for Matt Nagy and so on, but that's a team that could wind up kind of starting it. All right, but listen, they were 5-1. They've lost 5 in a row. Now Minnesota has jumped them in the standings because the Vikings beat them recently. In Chicago, as a matter of fact, that was a team they had beaten 4 times in a row. So I would say the teams that have me scratching my head right now are the Jets, the Chargers, and the Bears.
Okay, so there we've got the 3 on the losing side. Now let's go ahead and look on the positive side. The teams that, if we were to, again, do this 5 years down the road, we look back and we say, we nailed it. These are the franchises that right now, as we sit, are so perfectly set for the future that there is no reason why, and of course, strange things happen, but from the front office to the coaching to the players, they've done everything ready for the long haul on the winning side.
Well, it's interesting. I would say the 3 best teams in the league right now are Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans. That's how I have them ranked in my power rankings. But the way you framed the question, the only one of those I'd feel maybe comfortable with saying down the road is Kansas City. Yeah. Okay? Because Pittsburgh and New Orleans are going to have to make sometime in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, however you want to say, they're going to have to make a major decision on 2 quarterbacks that are among the greatest to ever play. And that, of course, are Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger. How much longer are they going to be around? And do they have the people to adequately replace them? Now, you have Kevin Colbert in Pittsburgh. You have Mickey Loomis in New Orleans. They do a great job of restocking things. But restocking the team and restocking the quarterback, as you know, can be 2 totally different matters. Right. So, again, I think those are the right teams. And now, some people I think would say Baltimore, but Lamar Jackson's kind of had a somewhat iffy year. I will throw in Buffalo maybe as the second team because of what we've seen from Josh Allen this year. I think they need to get better. Yeah, I think they need to get better on defense. Okay. And I want to keep an eye on the Browns as well. They, of course, have a new general manager this year. They're going to eventually have to make a decision on Baker Mayfield in terms of picking up the 5th-year option. That's still a year away and so on. They might have the best defensive end in the league, though, in Myles Garrett. I know he's been out a couple of weeks because of COVID and so on, but, he's been an absolute terror for them. They have a head coach who stresses balance. He's not looking for Baker Mayfield to carry the team. They need to get a little better on defense. They drafted pretty well the last couple of years. So as far as framing the question the way you did, and right now I kind of feel the AFC is a little better than the NFC right now, and head-to-head or however you want to go. I would say the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Browns are maybe teams we'll be talking about 3 or 4 years down the road.
You just made so many people happy in Cleveland just to even come close to mentioning them as a possibility of a franchise that sticks together. Do you realize that? Well, you've just handed a pre-Christmas present to everybody in Ohio, my friend. Well, at least.
Listen, me and my podcast partner, Julie Voigt, from PFG Vibe, we plan on attending the draft in Cleveland in late April. So I'm just kind of paving the way for maybe some free meals. So,
which, why not? Come on. Hey, look, we're in the media, people. If you haven't realized it yet, one of the big things is the free meal. Although Russell and I are still the guys who will tell stories about the people in press boxes that we couldn't stand at different places where we've been. We've been in the same places, but and different ones. And the members of the media, and I swear to you, it's the ones you would really expect who would go up and go, oh, they only let me have 2 hot dogs this time at halftime. I used to get 3 or 4 hot dogs. And hey, the pregame buffet meal is not good anymore. It's just, wait a minute. Here's one for you, Russell. Remember when pregame meals went from being free to having to pay for them?
You know what? I don't remember it. For me, I don't remember that. I think my first press box experience was in the late 80s at the Meadowlands for a Jets-Bills Monday night game when I was at College and Pro Football News Weekly and so on. And, it's like, wow, look at this. You sit behind glass, you're warm, you have the best seats in the house and so on, and there are people complaining in here. Oh, my God, what's wrong with you people? So,
Come on, you had to have them too, because the team that I covered all the time was the Miami Dolphins. And that was where I first started when I was just out of my teen years. And it was a free meal. It was, you showed up and the buffet was free. It was fine. But then years later, when they started in different places, because I was in Miami, and then I was in Denver, and I was in Seattle for a short time, and in New England, and bouncing around all these places. First time I heard somebody say that it was $5 for a meal, it was an uproar. You're making us pay? I said, it's $5. Oh, come on, but we cover them. Look at all the coverage we give this team. We get out there and we talk about them and we write about them. The least they can do is feed us for free. And this is the greatest band of freeloaders I ever saw in my life.
Well, what's funny about it? You and I covered enough games and so on. If you're covering a game, you don't get one meal. You get, okay?
Well, you get 3 meals sometimes.
Yeah, your pregame meal, and then there's something at halftime. Okay? So, I've been to the Hall of Fame, about 30. They do I always kind of laugh too. Okay? Okay, you're not sitting in the cold. If it's raining, you're covered. Okay? You're sitting at the 50-yard line. Yep. You're getting fed. Yep. Okay? And please don't say another word. Just don't say another word. I'm going to move. I'm going to sit in the back.
And I hear it today from the youngins who are in the press boxes. Yeah. Hey, it's a $10 meal. It's a $10 meal. Shut up and eat it. It's good food. Although we could spend. See, that would be a show all in itself, talking about the press box meals that people have served at different places. I still go back. I won't spend much time on it, but at Lambeau Field, where it was, and it's probably not there anymore. It was a family, a gentleman and his wife who came in, and they cooked the brats were there, and it was homemade, and you can see her bringing in the stuff she'd made in her stove, for crying out loud. That was a meal. That was you wanted to go to Green Bay just to have that. And then in other places, what do they give you? They give you a Stewart's hot box sandwich.
Right. Well, I can remember being at the vet for a few times for a couple of pretty standout meals. I can tell you that. So Philadelphia, there's nothing wrong with food from Philadelphia. They outdo themselves there. So
I'm not a big fan of Philly, but that's okay. I grew up in New York, so it's all right. That's to be expected. But I got to give them chops for their food.
Steak and pretzels, so I'm happy. Okay.
I want to remind everybody where to get a hold of Russell Baxter, because Russell is prolific when it comes to where he covers and where he writes and how he covers pro football. There's a number of ways to do it. First of all, here's the Facebook. It's at Russell S. Baxter. Make sure you put the S in there. On Twitter, it's Bax Football Guru, where you can follow him. He's on my follow pages. You can also catch him. He contributes to Full Press Coverage Sports Media and Jets X Factor, which are both on Facebook if you want to go there. His website is profootballguru.com, profootballguru. And one I want to get here for the Twitter as well. You've got PFG, at PFG Vibe, and at Julie Noted PFG. What are those two Twitter accounts too?
PFG Vibe is a creation of my friend Julie Voigt, NFL writer who covers the Colts. Her and her husband actually do some work for me on Pro Football Guru. Her husband, Robert, does some Colts previews for the draft for me every year and so on. Vibe, Voigt's insights, Baxter's expertise. Don't ask me how I came up with that. It just popped into my head. And it's kind of worked. Julie and I have a podcast. We've been kind of quiet for the last 7 or 8 months and so on. But I've been lucky enough to do a lot of shows with a lot of people I used to work with in the media and so on. We've had Mort on and Amy Trask and Ed Werder and Sean Salisbury and it's like name dropping here and so on. But
all great.
They all come on. We have a lot. Lance Zerline, take your pick and so on. So we have it covered. John Clayton's been on with us. John McClane's been on with us. So John McClane from the Texans, not John McClane from Die Hard, just so you know. Okay. And Julie Noted, that's Julie's account and so on. There's a little play on words I had with her. Instead of duly noted, we have Julie Noted.
Okay, good. So There you go. A lot of places to catch Russell, and we're going to have him back again. And it's taken us this long to reconnect. We've been back and forth with messages on Facebook and Twitter and all this, but Russell was a mainstay. He was the guy that we went to every single week on the press box and had great fun. I think that was College and Pro Football Weekly, wasn't it?
Pro Football News Weekly, and then I rolled it up to ESPN. And by the way, a couple of our publications we didn't talk about that I do are Fansided and NFL Spin Zone. NFL, that I do pieces for as well. I do the power rankings for Fanside. I do a sort of columns. As I tell people, if you follow me on Twitter, it's kind of like Liam Neeson in Taken. Okay, I have a special set of skills. I will find you and I will follow you. Okay.
And he will too. Trust me. That's really very
yes, and you'll get everything I've ever written, even if I put something together for the grocery store. Okay.
I see. Look, Russell comes up on my feed all the time. There he is. Bang, 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 bang. Next one. Get a life, man. Do you do anything? Do you not sleep? My God, man.
February I'll sleep. Okay.
No sleep till after Super Bowl. I got that one too. Russell, it's a pleasure, my friend. It's great to see you again. We'll do this again. Please make sure you look for Russell S. Baxter, and he'll be back here on the press box as well. Hey, really keep up the great work, and really to your family and everybody there, please stay safe, and really everybody stay healthy. I know you are, but it's that time where you got to hope that everybody just does the right thing, and I know you are. So be safe to your family as well.
You too. I echo those sentiments. And when you said it's good to see you, it's nice to be seen because, you and I did a lot of radio where we never saw each other.
Now we do.
We talked on the phone all the time and so on. So this is actually a rare opportunity to actually be face to face. And I feel like even though it was Caddy Corner, are you Paul Lynde and I'm Charlie Weaver?
It very well could be, although I don't know if I can laugh as well as Paul.
Paul Lynde. My mom's favorite was Paul Lynde. Oh my goodness, he was so funny.
Now you're going to make me think of who was the center square after Paul Lynde, whom I have no idea.
I don't know.
I'm going. Okay.
Oh, no,
thanks so much.
Man.
You just gave me one of those mental worms that's going to now roll through my head until I can get to Google and figure out who it was.
And when I get a text from you at 3:30 in the morning, I'll understand.
You exactly will know without a doubt. Hey, Russell, thanks a lot, buddy. Be well. We'll talk to you real soon.
You got it, Ed.
Russell S. Baxter. Be sure to stay connected on social media. I'm going to come back and do this first. See, I got the wrong button. That's what happened. They hit the wrong button. So let me do this. Thanks to Russell Baxter for all his time. Thanks to you. Don't forget, catch us live, catch us on Facebook, catch us on Twitter, catch us on YouTube. Don't forget the audio podcast as well, where you can find every episode of The Man in the Arena. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Stay safe, be well. Until next time, rock on, true believers. See ya! Be sure to stay connected on social media with questions, comments, conundrums, you name it. It's at Berliner Speaks on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. A great place to talk business and learn a lot more about what we do is simply check us out on LinkedIn. Just go there and search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that every single episode of The Man in the Arena is uploaded to YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com, or if you're on YouTube, search out Ed Berliner Media. If you would prefer to listen to The Man in the Arena, every episode is available for download on all the major audio podcast platforms. The Man in the Arena is produced by Entourage Management, LLC and Entourage Media.